My boyfriend of 5 years and I recently moved to Texas from Iowa, where both of our families live, to a new subdivision outside of a small town. The house we bought is at the end of a cul-de-sac with a huge field with nothing but trees behind it. We were both so excited to be starting our new lives together and to have bought our first house. We also have 2 dogs that are basically our children. My boyfriend decided that he was going out with some new co-workers to the city about 35 minutes away. I didn't really feel like going, as I'm more of an introvert and large crowds really aren't my forte. Also, I usually love being home alone because I can binge snack and watch scary movies he never wants to watch. So after getting home around 6 p.m. from work and the grocery store, I barricade myself and the dogs in my bedroom to commence the scary marathon of awesomeness. Also, on a side note, my dogs become on edge when my boyfriend isn't home at night and randomly bark in the night at seemingly nothing. It freaks me out a bit, but I've become used to it. We have one window in our room that's right next to our bed. I usually have the windows open, letting the air in, but tonight I only cracked it open just a little. So I'm balls deep in some cheesy 80s horror flick, and the dogs start barking. Ugh, stop already. I always take notice when they bark, however, just in case. I turn the light on, look around, and nothing. So, lights off and back to the dits running up the stairs. It's around 11 now and I'm sure the boyfriend will be gone a couple more hours, no biggie. The dogs start barking again though, but this time they don't stop. So I slowly look out the window. I don't see anything until I catch it. At the bottom of the window, peering up at me, are a set of eyes. Not the whole face, not even the nose, just the eyes. The window is pretty low to the ground, so this man was crouching down. At first, I thought it was my boyfriend trying to scare me. We sometimes like to do that, but not to this extent. So, of course, I try to play it off like I'm not scared. Calvin, you're dumb. Seriously, it's not funny. The staring continues. Okay, you're really milking this now, fool. Hardy ha ha. Now, stop, really. You're freaking the dogs out. Then, the eyes start moving, slowly. Still on the window, so I can't see the face, but moving across it. Sliding up it now, so I can only see one eye until the man is standing up fully. Clearly too big to be my 5'11" boyfriend. I freeze. I've always thought of myself as tough, and from watching so many scary movies, able to deal with sketchy situations. Until now. I literally don't move, and the dogs still bark. He just stares. I quickly fumble for my phone, finding my voice, and yell at this psycho to leave, and I'm calling the cops. That's when he takes a sidestep in full view of me, just stands there while I dial for the police, stammering over my words. Then I hear something tap the window. It's a large knife tapping on the window, and he must have gotten the reaction he wanted from me, because a slow sadistic smile slides across his face. Knowing full well that the police are coming, he takes one large step backwards and stands there forever. Each step backwards is slow and deliberate while maintaining the most bone-chilling smile until he reaches the fence, climbs over. Still staring in the direction, I see him peek over the fence one last time before disappearing into the night. The cops never found him.
Number 4.
This story happened a year ago. I was living with my then boyfriend, now fiance. We lived in a townhouse in the suburbs, pretty safe area. There had been some robberies a couple of blocks away, but they weren't common and I felt pretty safe walking home alone at night. So one weekend, my boyfriend's brother, Marshall, and his girlfriend, Amy, and her brother, Curtis, were visiting. We were all just going to chill, have a couple of drinks, play video games, and relax. My boyfriend had his LSATs, and after months of hard studying, he wanted to just relax before the exam. Unfortunately though, I ended up getting very sick. It was the worst flu I've ever had. Extremely high fever, 1 degree higher, and I would have had to have gone to hospital. Nausea, headache, body aches, and all that good stuff. Of course, I didn't want that to stop my friends from having a good time, so they came over anyways and I just stayed in my room. They went out to eat before they came over, so I was in bed alone watching TV. Honestly, I felt like I was dying though, but I slept on and off. At about 4 p.m, I heard the door open and figured that they were back, but when I called out for my boyfriend, no one came. But I knew he would come and check on me as soon as he came back. So I assumed I just heard something fall. All the neighbors were making noises. So I dismissed it and went back to sleep. I remember I was sleeping on my back, and in deep sleep, I groggily opened my eyes and thought I saw a figure move across my room. I was so heavily medicated and so sick, I didn't even fully understand what had happened and what that meant. Like, I saw the figure, but it didn't connect in my brain that I may have seen someone. And since it was pretty dark in my room, I think a part of me just thought it was the TV. Finally, at around 7 p.m, everyone came back. They were loud. Amy, my boyfriend's brother's girlfriend, was very tipsy. And she's very fun when drunk, so there was lots of laughter. My boyfriend came in to check on me. He brought me some soup. He sat and talked about his day as I ate it. I asked him to look in the basket under the bed to get the new bottle of aspirin. We had a full-sized bed. I had one small basket under the bed where I kept extra pill bottles, toothbrushes, shaving cream, and stuff like that. I didn't know it right away, but thank God he looked under the bed. He put his head up and handed me the aspirin, but his facial expression had changed, like he lost all the color from his face. I didn't think much of it and said thank you.
Come on, I'm gonna take you to the bathroom.
He never stutters. I was kind of out of it, but I remember picking up on it. I told him no, I really didn't have to pee and I didn't feel like getting up. He said,
No, let's go. I don't want to have to climb back up the stairs just because you need to pee in 10 minutes.
I remember feeling pretty hurt by his words, but knew he was right since I just had soup and half a bottle of water. He walked me downstairs and I couldn't understand why we didn't just go to the bathroom upstairs. I think I was so sick I just felt too exhausted to question it. He sat me down on the couch. What's going on? I practically whispered this, I was told, although in my head it sounded loud. He took out his phone and his hand was shaking. I asked what was wrong and I will never forget how my heart sank and I felt like I couldn't breathe when he whispered,
There's someone under your bed.
Amy laughed, so I laughed too, thinking it was a prank, but it felt serious. My boyfriend's brother suggested that we get out of the house, so we did. As we were leaving, we heard a thud upstairs. We quickly left and drove away, then called the police. The police came and searched the house, but they didn't find anyone. He must have known we suspected he was there and left. My boyfriend couldn't give any description, only that he saw sneakers, but it was so dark he really couldn't see. But the scariest thing that still leaves me on edge is that the police, they found a knife under the bed. It was a small steak knife, but very dull and rusty. There weren't any killings in the area, so my friends assumed he just wanted a place to sleep. I'm not really sure how he got into our place, but I have some theories. I'm really proud of how my boyfriend handled everything. He's a calm, collected person, but I always assumed he wouldn't be that way in a crisis. I just hope I never see this person again, ever.
Number 3.
This started about a month ago on weekends. To help better explain the story, I'll explain my house. The house is actually rather large, 2-story house, or was. It was split into 3 separate apartments well before I ever moved in. There are 2 down on the first floor and 1 upstairs. The apartment next door is occupied by one of my best friends, and the upstairs apartment is very recently empty. I've lived here for 6 years with a roommate, our 3 cats, and my dog. Her and I have never had any issues prior to this, but very recently our dog started barking randomly at nothing during the night, or so we thought. He would look out the window very intently, then run to the front door barking the whole way. We actually thought he was just seeing a cat or a rabbit and brushed it off, just telling him to hush. One night, my friend or neighbor came knocking and said he thought he had seen someone out on his porch. He said he had grabbed a cane and tried to follow them, but they jumped over the porch and ran off. Since then, we made sure to check every time my dog seemingly barked at nothing during the night, and my neighbor had seen a figure suddenly bolt at least twice upon checking. We've called the cops, but they said that there wasn't much they could do. They asked if there was anyone we could think of who may be messing with us, and while there were some neighbors we had occasionally had to call the landlord on, there was no one we could think of. The issues we'd had never been more serious than them being a little loud at 3 a.m. on a drunken Friday night. So we continued to live our normal lives. My roommate works 3rd shift while I and my neighbor work 2nd shift, although he had just recently switched to this shift from 3rds himself. Nothing ever happened while I was home alone, and I figured it was over. Recently, however, I got a girlfriend, and due to scheduling, I will usually spend the night at her house in the middle of the week, as those are often when my days off occur. Meaning, at night, there is no one home except for my dog, as my roommate only has weekends off. Last week, I was at my girlfriend's and things were going well. We'd had a bit of a fight, so I was lying in bed, mulling things over in my head, unable to sleep. As I'm laying there, around 2 a.m, my phone buzzes. I check it and see a text from my roommate asking me to call her when I get the text. I figured she was on break at work and just bored, or wants to shoot the shit about Overwatch since it had just come out, and I hadn't got to play it yet, not having been home. I give her a call and she says she's at home and thinks somebody's been in the house. I ask what makes her think that, and she says that our friend or neighbor had gotten home late from his job around 1:30. He said he'd been home watching random stuff on YouTube, laughing rather loudly since he thought he was literally the only person in the house. He said he thought he had heard someone walking around, and at first thought it was me until he remembered I was at my girlfriend's. He wondered why my dog didn't bark until he realized I'd taken my dog with me since her kids wanted to meet him. He called my roommate to ask if she'd called off work when he said he started hearing a scratchy meow outside his window. He walked outside to find our eldest cat outside meowing to be allowed back into the house. Our cats never go outside normally, but had once before, so he scooped him up and went over to the apartment. The door that separates our apartment is normally unlocked since he comes over a lot, and put him down. He tells my roommate this, and she said she then told her boss, who told her to come home. My roommate came home and said she found our front door unlocked, which she never leaves unlocked, and the door to our sunroom was shut. We never shut that door since our cat's litter boxes are in there, and they wouldn't be able to get into them if we did. She's checking around and finds boxes moved out of our hall closet, and a bunch of my card game and board game boxes scattered around, not how we had left them. She then said that she heard a meow and found one of our cats shut in the bedroom. Every day before she leaves, she makes sure no cats are in there, since one has a bad habit of pissing on the bed if shut in there. Also, our bass guitar was knocked off of its guitar stand and onto the floor. None of the cats weigh enough to knock over that thing, especially not our kitten who was shut in there. So she gets freaked out and checks the windows. One in the sunroom is open so the cats can sit in it and get some air, but the screen is untouched. She said that she went outside and found a trash can dragged up against the house under that window, as if someone had stood on it to peep in. So the best we can figure is that whoever this person is, they were sneaking around again, and when they didn't hear our dog, they broke in. They must have been in the middle of looking through our stuff when they heard my neighbour laughing, panicked and ran off. I'm not taking any of this lightly and will be acquiring a gun since I'm often here alone at night.
Number 2.
So, before I explain the story, I just want to set a few things straight. I had this friend who was a twin. They had a younger sister too, but that is irrelevant. Shortly after the twins were born, the mum had a stillbirth, and it caused her a massive amount of stress. My friend would tell me that he remembers when he was younger, he would wake up to his mum in the other room talking to the empty crib. She would have conversations at strange hours of the night, but apparently this kind of behavior is pretty normal given the circumstances. It messed her up pretty bad, and later on she started telling everyone she was a medium type thing. She claimed she had a sixth sense and was sensitive to afterlife phenomena. The older the twins got, she started to calm down a bit with the strange behavior, but she still believed she had a gift. So, now that I've gotten that out of the way, I can tell you the creepy experience that happened to me when I was at their house during a boys' night. It was the twins' birthday, and the one I was friends with managed to convince his mum to invite a small handful of friends over. His mum made plans to go out that night with her new partner, which was great because we always got up to no good, and without supervision, this was the perfect opportunity to get up to some mischief. His mum finally left us alone. After an hour or so, we were running out of things to do. I don't know why, but I suggested we try a Ouija board. I've seen it in movies and thought it would be hilarious if we tried it out ourselves. All the boys agreed and I got to work setting up the table outside. I cut out letters with a yes and no. I placed them in a circle on a plastic table and put one of his mum's shot glasses in the middle. I explained the rules to the guys and we were all extremely excited to give it a go. The other twin was tired though. He said he was going to have a shower and call it an early night. He also didn't like the idea of us doing this sort of thing, but we continued to do so anyways, despite his concern. We decided that we would set up a tripod camera to overlook the table just in case anything supernatural were to happen. We turned it on and started to record. At this point, we were all sitting around the table. We placed our fingers on the shot glass and started firing questions into the circle. We were asking stupid, immature questions like, "Are you gay?" or "Can we speak to Elvis?" etc. Nothing seemed to happen, but we were all laughing and carrying on. Then the glass started to move, but we could tell straight away it was someone on the table. You could tell by the way the glass was moving. It was obvious and annoying because I really wanted it to work. We started to get restless and were on the verge of giving up on the whole thing because people were being stupid and no one was giving it a fair chance. But the next bit is where things get weird. The air became cold and the breeze, it died down. I remember that chilling feeling, shivering outside in the cold. My eyes started to water and I felt hypersensitive. I'm pretty sure the other guys felt it too. And that's when it happened. The glass started moving randomly. It felt completely different this time. It wasn't being pushed, if that makes sense. It was kind of dragging our fingers along the table. The movement was slow and eerie. At this point, we all looked up at each other, darting from face to face, trying to figure out who was messing around this time. Every single face around the circle looked terrified and confused. The glass moved from letter to letter, not spelling words, but only gibberish. I hated the feeling, but I needed to know more. I started to ask serious questions this time. Who are you? Still, nothing. The glass was just moving around with no purpose. Then it would stop as if it disconnected. Then it would start up again. It would get weak, then fade back in with the movement. Are you a person? I asked. The glass moved to the center, then back down to no. This is the moment where I knew that this was a bad idea. The glass started to pick up speed. It was moving around in circles, completely ignoring the letters. Its movements became fast and aggressive. It felt as if it was being pushed into the table really hard. Everyone was horrified. A few guys even took their fingers off of the shot glass in shock. The remainder of us decided to push on out of curiosity. Are you dead? Another person asked. The glass slowly slid over to yes. Then, all of a sudden, the lights and all of the power to the house turned off. We were all sitting in pitch black darkness with sudden silence. We shot up and broke away from the table. There was a sense of panic in the air, and we all started to completely freak out. But then the power, it surged back on, and the TV, it started up again. The other twin ran outside, still wet from the shower, only wearing a towel. He came out asking who turned the bathroom lights off while he was in there. We explained the situation outside with the Ouija board, and he refused to believe it. Then I thought, yes, we recorded it with the camera. We ran over to the tripod and grabbed the camera to show him the evidence. But the camera, it was turned off, and we were all dumbfounded because it had full battery when we started, and we were positive we pressed record. We quickly turned it back on, and yes, the battery was just about full, like I thought. We pressed play, but me being the amateur that I am, I had recorded it on an awkward angle. You couldn't see the table, just the back of our heads. As it played out, we got to the part just before the power to the house turned off, and then so did the camera footage. The video just stopped. Somehow, the camera turned off at the exact same time the house power went out. The weird thing was, the camera was on a battery and had nothing to do with the house power. The mood of the night was ruined, and no one was happy or excited. We were all just quiet. Everyone was trying to process what had just happened. Even the twin who was in the shower was confused and creeped out. We asked him if he was the one who messed around with the power inside, and he swore he hadn't. I believe him to this day. I never messed around with a Ouija board after that chilling experience. What started off as a joke became weird really fast. I just want to know if anyone else has had a similar story. This happened years ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday. My eyes are watering as I'm trying to tell you this. Now that I'm older, I'm thinking about trying it one last time this weekend with a good friend. I'm actually hoping for a similar reaction now that I'm more mature. I'm sure I can hold it together this time and understand it a bit better. I don't know what to think, but yeah, that's my story. Thanks for listening.
Number 1.
I am and always have been a very small girl, standing at 4'11", full grown now at 27, and I've always been able to pass as being much younger than I am, especially if I'm not wearing makeup. When I was a small child of about 7 or 8, my father bought a little cabin in a town in Texas called Livingston, in an area of Livingston called Onalaska. I specify because of the second part of the story. Anyone with kids needs to be wary of the area. The cabin was really nothing remarkable at only 600 square feet. It was really just one giant room, a teeny kitchen with the size of a normal bathroom, and a bathroom the size of a large closet, and a porch out front. The whole property consisted of 2 lots, so there was plenty of space, but the cabin itself was dinky. The whole area was in a strange mix between backwoods and suburbia. It was a true neighborhood, but not in the prim and neatly kept neighborhoods I was used to in suburbia Houston. Despite this, it became a very fun place for me, and some of my greatest memories in life are at that cabin, including my evacuation story from Houston during Hurricane Rita, but that is a story for another day. Anyways, around 11 to 12 years old, my father bought me a four-wheeler, and the little lake town suddenly became a lot bigger. I didn't go super far, but I definitely ended up going further than I had ever gone before, and it was quite common to see me zipping up and down the roads with a pile of neighborhood kids on the back of the four-wheeler when we would go up to the lake house on weekend visits. This was around 2001 to 2002, so cell phones were a thing, but it was still common for people not to have them. Usually I had a beeper that I carried around, but with no phones at the lake house, my father gave me a walkie-talkie with a very long reach instead. Looking back on it now, from a world of cell phones, this seems like a bad idea. But this was a small town and we spent so much time here that it felt safe. So one of these weekends, I was buzzing around my neighborhood like I usually did, and I stopped at this peninsula that overlooked the lake. This was a set of docks that us kids always came to when we wanted to swim, despite the very real threat of giant alligators. But being stupid kids, we really don't worry about that. And I was overlooking the lake when my walkie-talkie buzzed to life. Naturally thinking it was my parents trying to reach me, I answered quickly. I couldn't quite make out what they said at first, so I tried confirming that it was my dad. This point in the neighborhood was a little ways away from the cabin, but I had reached my parents from this point before, so despite the fact I could not quite recognize the voice, I assumed that it was my dad. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first. I don't remember exactly how the conversation went, but it was off enough that I remember being slightly annoyed. Garbled questions that I answered, but no answers that would have hinted who I was or where I was. Eventually the conversation started to drift in a way that I knew something was off, but I was not alarmed just yet, as my dad was notorious for pulling pranks on me and goofing around. I kept talking, stupidly. Alarm bells weren't going off yet. Finally though, the guy on the other end of the walkie-talkie made a comment. I cannot for the life of me remember exactly what he said, but it was enough to make me doubt that it was my father. This is when things took an extremely creepy turn. Bear in mind, I had been talking to this guy pretending to be my father for a good 15 minutes, sitting on my four-wheeler on this peninsula.
I can see you. You should come take a ride on my boat,
he said. My father had a boat, but this was so out of character that it made me realize it wasn't my father. Dad? You're not Dad, are you?
What are you talking about?
He said. If you can see me, I started, feeling a bit peeved that this guy had been messing with me. What am I wearing? He paused for a second before the walkie-talkie crackled to life, and he said very clearly,
You're wearing an orange shirt. You have red hair and you're sitting on a four-wheeler right by the swim docks. Why don't you come ride in my boat?
At this point, my eyes widened and my blood ran cold. This entire time, some strange guy that I don't know had been watching me from God knows where. It took me about 10 seconds to look around wildly and then kick the four-wheeler up and race out of there so fast that the wheels had a hard time catching the ground. I remember the wheel spun out against the gravel beneath me, and when the four-wheeler finally started moving, little me had a hard time holding on. I floored it the entire way home, stopped in the middle of the yard, and burst into the house. Obviously, the first thing I did was ask my parents if they had contacted me, which they had not, and hadn't for hours. I was in such a panic that there was just no way my dad wouldn't have confessed that it had been him. He was a practical joker, but he knew the fun was over. I hate to think what might have happened had I continued sticking around the area, or if I hadn't have figured out that it wasn't my dad pulling my leg. Nothing came of this incident though, and my childhood up there resumed as normal. Eventually, the weekend visits stopped, but the story doesn't end there. During my parents' divorce, I moved to live at the lake house permanently with my father, or at least until we could find something better. This was the only place we could go when he left my mother, which is a long story in and of itself, but I won't get into that. My father had recently suffered from health issues, so I took a job at a nearby gas station, tobacco barn, to pay the bills and let him recuperate. Thankfully, the lake house had no bills, save for electricity, water, and the internet, so my small salary was enough to keep us going. I only worked there for 3 months, but those 3 months were by far the creepiest I've ever experienced. Within the first month, a rather tall and obese man became infatuated with me, and he couldn't have been creepier. He had a short crew-cut hair and a slightly unkempt beard and moustache combo. The first time we ran into each other, he stared at me with these wide, crazy eyes and ordered his gas, and just stood there for 2 to 3 solid minutes, just staring. When I asked if I could help him, he said nothing. Now, the part of the tobacco farm I worked in was strictly the gas side, and I was pretty much in a glass box with an opening to take people's money and give them their cigarettes, which I could not have been more thankful for. Several times that this man came to visit, he would leave to pump his gas after staring at me awkwardly. About the 4th or 5th time, after I thought he had left, I hear a knock on the other side of the barn on the glass. There he was, face pressed against the glass, staring at me with this wide, manic grin and waving at me with just his fingers. It was enough to send me running for my manager when he left, demanding to go on break before I peed myself. The last time I saw him, I will never forget though. It has been etched into my mind so deeply that I doubt bleach could scrub it away. He arrives as he usually did and orders his gas. This time, however, he reached through the hole in the glass and grabbed my hand before I could put the cash away in the cash register. It wasn't a violent grab, but it was firm enough to keep me from pulling away. Being a very sheltered 18-year-old, I froze in place.
"I love you,"
he said, refusing to let go of my hand. I simply stared at him, unnerved and alarm bells ringing in my head.
"Say it.
"What?" I responded.
Say you love me."
Naturally, I just wanted this guy to go away, and being so freaking scared out of my mind at this point of him, I stammered and said it out of impulse. Maybe he would let me go and go away. "I love you," I said uneasily.
"Call me if you need anything. What's my number?"
He asked again. This threw me off completely, and the look on my face probably gave away my confusion, because he repeated himself, despite my stammering that I did not know. Finally, he said something that made my blood run cold. I felt like I was going to throw up.
"It's 911.
He winked. This guy was the sheriff deputy, the person I'd have to call if I got into some sort of trouble in town. The person I'd have to call if I had a medical emergency, or if someone tried to rob me. And he wouldn't let go of my hand. I just nodded, trying to keep myself from shaking bad enough for him to feel it. He had never pulled up in a police car or anything, but when I talked to my manager, she confirmed what he said as being true. Once he did let go of me and went on his way, I retreated to the back and demanded to be relieved from the gas station area. I didn't care. I just did not want to see that guy ever again. Thankfully, we moved soon after, so I never had to. But I will never forget the leering grin that man gave me every single time he purchased gasoline. You'd think moving away would be the end of the story, but no. it got even worse when I went to college. And you wouldn't think that that would be the case, considering I was in Galveston. I needed to go to my counselor to discuss a few things, and this usually involved about 30 minutes of chit-chat, as my counselor and I had become close while I was attending school. During one of these chats, which my father had attended due to him attending school and the same classes as I in an effort to finally get his degree, I mentioned on Alaska, Texas, and how we had owned a lake house up there. Instantly, the happy expression left my counselor's face. She informed me that she had been a social worker in that area for quite a few years, and suddenly, my childhood playground took an extremely dark turn, and the sheriff at the gas station became a nightmare. Apparently, the area was notorious for pedophilia, kidnappings, and other horrible incidents. Whole neighborhoods, including police officers, were in on it, and it was common for people trying to out the incidents to either go missing or be completely thrown out of the community through intimidation tactics. She proceeded to tell me of several cases she had worked on, careful to leave out confidential details, of course, including incidents of entire families being in on the whole mess. When I told her about the sheriff I had encountered, she kind of paled and wouldn't tell me any more, except that she wasn't surprised. The conversation went on for over an hour and a half, but it was enough to make me never want to return to the small town I had called my childhood summer home, and vow to never, ever bring any children I might have in the future